The story kicks off in total darkness. A stunning blonde girl watches coldly as her father forces a silver-haired boy to his knees. The boy glares back, completely defiant, even as he is treated like a mere toy. It turns out this world is straight out of a brutal dark romance novel called Flower of Hell. She remembers her past life where a friend hands her the book, totally hyping it up. But the contents are so messed up she practically throws it across the room. The original story focuses heavily on the tragic life of the female lead, Sylvia. And yeah, it is a totally unhinged 19-plus reverse harem. This world is ruled by 5 powerful houses, each represented by a different symbol and color. Sylvia belongs to the blue Fedelians, making her the ultimate enemy of the black Agriches. With her gorgeous silver hair and golden eyes, Sylvia's tragic fate is sealed from the start. The whole mess begins when her older brother, Cassis, mysteriously vanishes. Back in the present, the silver-haired boy is chained up and dragged away like a ragdoll. The man puffing a cigar on the throne is Lant Agrich, the ruthless villain and the blonde girl's father. She suddenly realizes the battered boy is Cassis Fedelian and mentally curses because her peaceful life is officially wrecked. Later, she approaches a nervous guard and casually asks for the basement keys. The guard stammers, refusing to let her pass on the boss's orders. But she steps closer, leaning in with a sly smile. The poor guy instantly turns to Materred, completely melting under her charm. As he fumbles around in a panic, she smoothly snatches the keys right out of his hand. He freaks out, but she coolly opens the heavy iron door anyway. She figures a quick peek won't hurt, knowing the guard is too scared to snitch. Gripping her lantern, she steps down into the cold, creepy dungeon. Peering through the iron bars, her eyes widen at the sight. Cassis is chained to the wall and covered in blood, but she knows he is her only ticket out of this hellhole. The scene shifts to the Agrich family's great banquet, an elite event completely void of actual love. With 4 wives, Lant Agrich has a massive amount of children. Only the top 3 overachievers actually get a seat at the table. Everyone else is essentially invisible to their terrifying father. Even as a child, Roxana is never welcome at these elite dinners. She sits elegantly sipping tea, reflecting on her twisted childhood. Before a certain incident changes everything, she is just an overlooked daughter. Flashing back to her birth, the first voice she hears is soft and warm. Her mother is a stunning beauty with deep blue eyes and golden hair. As a baby, Roxana is pretty hyped about her new looks, thinking she hit the reincarnation jackpot. But then the curtains part and she meets her father. He coldly names her Roxana without a drop of emotion. And just like that, he turns on his heel and dips out of the room. Baby Roxana throws a tiny fit, realizing her new dad is absolute trash. Still, her mother holds her tight, showering her with affection. But when her mom mentions growing up to be an admirable Agrich, reality hits her like a truck. She remembers the novel. The Agriches are an illicit family running the criminal underworld. They deal in poison, drugs, and never hesitate to off someone in cold blood. Worse, every child born into the family is forced through a brutal, messed-up training system. Roxana realizes she is chained to this dark destiny with zero way out. She isn't a fighter and completely lacks any practical combat skills. Standing before her giant father, he harshly declares she has no unique talents. He glares down at her with pure disgust and dismisses her from his sight. She grits her teeth, completely annoyed by his toxic expectations. But the final straw is when this rotten family actually expects her to learn the art of seduction while she is barely a teenager. Flashback time, Roxana remembers her older brother Achille, who is basically a golden retriever trapped in a family of wolves. She vents to him about their father forcing her to learn the art of seduction, which she has absolutely zero interest in. Achille listens quietly, but Roxana regrets everything she said to him that day. Because even though he smiles sweetly and promises to protect her, his hands are literally trembling. She stubbornly insists she wants no part in their family's twisted traditions. But their peaceful rebellion comes to a horrific halt when the incident drops. Roxana watches in pure shock as Achilles' lifeless body is dumped right in front of her. He failed the family's brutal special exam and gets casually disposed of by a masked guard like actual trash. Snapping back to the present, Roxana stands in the dungeon with the chained-up Cassis. She examines his battered state, realizing her family hit him with a nasty, paralyzing poison. Without missing a beat, she pops the cork off a tiny glass vial. She steps in close, grabbing his face and tipping the liquid into his mouth. She shushes him, warning him not to spit out the antidote. Looking deep into his eyes, she admits that despite where he is, she genuinely wants him to live. She bluntly asks if he understands the situation. But obviously, Cassis isn't about to willingly swallow a random potion given to him in his enemy's murder basement. Seeing him resist, Roxana realizes waiting for the meds to kick in naturally is gonna take way too long. So she winds up and absolutely decks him in the gut, forcing him to swallow it. He completely folds, slumping onto her shoulder as she casually apologizes for the rough treatment. Sometime later, Cassis wakes up chained to the wall, already fully alert like an absolute tank. Roxana steps into the light, and he immediately demands to know what garbage she forced down his throat. She calmly explains it was an antidote to stop the poison from turning his muscles into jelly for the next 5 days. She points out he should be thankful since he can actually hold a conversation now without passing out. But Cassis is totally on guard, asking what her sick game is and what she plans to extort from him. Roxana just shrugs it off and casually drops his full name, completely catching him off guard. He grits his teeth in sheer frustration. He demands to know who she really is and if she's just another low-level underling for the vile Agrich family. He glares at her with glowing golden eyes, demanding an answer. But Roxana notices something slightly off about his intense stare. She steps right into his personal space, realizing he can't actually see her at all. To prove it, she confidently stands right in his blind spot. She waves a hand directly in front of his face, and he completely fails the eye test, just yelling at her to move. She smirks, relieved that his reaction to her face earlier was so blank. On top of that, he literally just asked if she was an underling, completely failing to recognize her status. Which is wild because her dad dragged him here specifically to show him off, meaning Cassis definitely saw her yesterday. Deciding to investigate further, she violently yanks his torn shirt open, making him flinch. She spots a wicked black crest on his stomach and realizes they hit him with dark sorcery, not just poison. Luckily, she knows the blinding effect is only temporary. She assures him his vision will be blurry for a couple of days, but he'll recover. Then she grabs him by the chin, forcing him to face her. She confidently declares that no matter how much he doubts her, she is sincerely rooting for his survival. With a dramatic spin, she heads out, promising to return. True to her word, she pops back in the next day, and the day after that, casually offering painkillers while he grunts in annoyance. Later, she walks in looking absolutely stunning, completely surrounded by red butterflies. But Cassis is still playing hardball and just tells her to get lost. She sighs, super annoyed that she brought him actual good food instead of the dungeon garbage, and he's still acting like a brat. Understanding his severe trust issues, she pulls out a tiny, concentrated nutrient pill instead. But Cassis scoffs, swearing he'd have to be crazy to eat anything handed to him by an Agrich. Praising his stubborn attitude, Roxana decides to do things the hard way and straight up punches him in the stomach again to force the pill down his throat. As he coughs violently, he glares at her, totally baffled as to why an enemy is going to such wild extremes just to keep him fed. Without hesitation, Roxana smacks her hand over his mouth, forcing the pill right past his lips. She calmly turns away, letting him know the pill melts instantly so he doesn't need water. Cassis glares at her retreating back, completely baffled as to why an enemy is going out of her way to help him. Finally, he stops her and asks for her name. She softly replies, Roxana. Cassis thinks the name perfectly matches her striking red eyes. To him, her presence is like a brilliant, burning crimson sun piercing through the dark. The scene transitions with a flutter of red butterflies. Back in her room, Roxana's maid, Emily, gently knocks and enters. She sets a glass of water on the table with a soft clatter. Emily formally reports that Roxana has reached the 5th stage of poison tolerance, meaning it's time to up the dosage. Roxana stares at the glass, knowing she's casually sipping a near-lethal dose that brings on brutal stomach pains and temporary paralysis. But she has her own reasons for surviving this nightmare. She pours a vial of purple poison into her drink and asks about Jeremy's whereabouts. Just as she downs the toxic cocktail, her door violently bursts open. It's Jeremy Agrich swaggering in to pick her up. But don't let the smile fool you, he's the villainous second male lead of the original novel. In the original story, the Agriches kidnap the heroine, Sylvia, and totally shatter her mind with the news of her brother's death. This trauma sends Sylvia into a complete rage, leading her to absolutely annihilate the entire Agrich bloodline. And the main bastard responsible for Sylvia's trauma was none other than Jeremy. In the present, they stroll down the lavish halls, with Jeremy asking if she was checking on her poison butterflies again. She nods, explaining it's her absolute last egg and she needs the experiment to succeed. Jeremy practically pouts, whining that he doesn't want her losing any more of her own blood to feed the creepy bugs. Roxana just smiles, thinking the future psycho actually acts like an adorable kid right now. Changing the subject, Jeremy brings up the new toy their dad brought home, annoyed that they've been completely banned from the dungeon. Roxana smoothly agrees the prisoner seems special as she pushes open the heavy banquet doors. Jeremy raises an eyebrow, pointing out she's literally never cared about their father's captives before. He quickly shrugs it off with a grin, playfully patting her head and declaring he'll let her have this one. She flashes a charming smile and the two head inside. Roxana gives a perfect, elegant bow to their terrifying father. Meanwhile, Jeremy casually plops down into his chair like he owns the place. The table is impeccably set for the top-ranking siblings. Lant Agrich stands before a lightning-lit window, officially kicking off the monthly banquet by praising their brutal achievements. He notes Roxana is sitting comfortably in second place and asks for an update on her butterfly experiment. She confidently reports the final egg is thriving, guaranteeing she won't disappoint him. She then smoothly pivots, asking if his unusually good mood is because of his brand new catch. Lant chuckles, casually dropping the bomb that the Fidelians are frantically searching for the boy. Jeremy jumps out of his seat, totally stunned that they kidnapped the blue heir. Lant eyes Roxana suspiciously, wondering why she's suddenly showing intense interest in a prisoner. She plays it perfectly, raising her glass and explaining this toy is completely different from the rest. She reminds him that the Fidelians pride themselves on being hopelessly noble and righteous. Flashing a wicked grin, she asks her dad wouldn't it be incredibly entertaining to break the most upstanding Fidelian and force him to bark like a dog beneath her feet. Lant absolutely eats it up, raising his wine glass to her sadistic idea and ending the meeting on a high note. He dismisses the siblings with a cold glare. The heavy doors click shut behind them in the hallway. Instantly, Jeremy violently shoves a passing maid out of his way, completely on edge. He nervously asks Roxana if she's really planning to train the new toy all by herself. She confirms it, internally laughing at how cute his clingy jealousy is, when suddenly someone screams at them. It's Charlotte, the red-haired sister, throwing an absolute temper tantrum right in the middle of the hall. She points an angry finger, whining that it's totally unfair because she called dibs on the handsome prisoner first. Roxana sighs, completely unfazed, and reminds the brat that their father already gave her permission. Charlotte shouts back, but Jeremy steps in like a loyal guard dog to defend his sister. Charlotte completely loses it, shrieking at the top of her lungs that the toy belongs to her. Roxana remembers this spoiled brat getting rejected by the dungeon guards earlier. Charlotte threatens to go snitch to their father, but Roxana just shuts her down by dropping her name with a freezing, dead-eyed glare. Roxana's eyes turn ice cold as she reminds the spoiled brat that playing with the captives is a privilege, not a right. She steps forward, her heels clicking sharply against the floor. Without breaking eye contact, she slowly pulls a handful of sharp metal needles right out of her own hair. Charlotte readies her whip, but Roxana just sighs, completely unbothered by her sister's reckless stupidity. In a flash of movement, Roxana strikes, leaving a brutal splatter of blood on the floor. Charlotte collapses, trembling like a leaf, while Jeremy casually stretches, wondering why she even tries to pick fights she can't win. Jeremy tells Roxana to head out, promising he'll handle the cleanup. The second she's gone, he aggressively grabs Charlotte by the hair, giving her a sinister new target. He's already furious that the blue Fidelian prisoner is causing so much drama in their house. Leaning in close, he whispers exactly who is locked in the dungeon. He flashes a totally psychotic grin, manipulating Charlotte to destroy the guy just because she can't have him. Later, Roxana visits her private greenhouse, approaching a massive, glowing egg. It belongs to a terrifyingly rare demonic species known as the poison butterfly. Hatching it is hard, but taming the beast inside is even worse. Without flinching, she takes a knife and slices her own arm, letting her blood drip down. The demonic egg eagerly absorbs the blood, needing it to grow stronger and faster. She remembers that in the original novel, a character known as the White Tamer easily controlled these beasts. She might not have his op abilities, but she's determined to try anyway. She gently pats the shell, knowing the more hidden weapons she has, the better her chances of survival. As she leaves, her thoughts drift to her insanely dangerous older brother, Dion. He completely skipped the banquet, meaning their father definitely sent him out on a dark mission. Suddenly, a maid rushes up the grand staircase to intercept her. She reports a major incident. A dungeon guard was just found completely knocked out. Roxana's eyes narrow, instantly figuring out Charlotte threw a violent tantrum down there. But then the maid drops a bombshell. Charlotte somehow completely shattered the prisoner's magical shackles. Roxana is stunned, knowing her sister is way too weak to break demon-grade chains by herself. A smirk creeps onto Roxana's face as she realizes Cassis must have totally manipulated Charlotte into freeing him. She runs a hand through her hair, genuinely amused. Far from being mad, she finds his cunning survival skills seriously impressive. Walking down the hall, she bumps right into her mother. Her mom warmly greets her, looking as angelic and gentle as always. She asks Roxana what she's up to, and excitedly mentions she heard the news about Roxana snagging second place at the banquet. But mid-sentence, her mother freezes in absolute horror. She spots the fresh blood dripping down Roxana's arm from the greenhouse ritual. Roxana quickly hides her hand behind her back, brushing it off like it's absolutely nothing. Her mom gasps, trying to collect herself. Regaining her composure, she forces a bright smile and tells Roxana how proud she is. She praises her daughter for becoming a true agrich. Roxana gives a polite thanks, but the compliment completely kills the mood. Her eyes go dead, and she coldly tells her mother she doesn't have the energy to spend time with her right now. Her mom flinches, meekly accepting the harsh rejection. Roxana politely tells her to take care, closing the door on her. The heavy wooden doors shut firmly, physically and emotionally blocking her mother out. Inside, she casually orders Emily to brew her a cup of tea with an extra dose of deadly poison. The title True Agrich makes her absolutely sick to her stomach. She remembers her mother doing absolutely nothing to save Achille, proving their bond is permanently shattered. Meanwhile, down in the dungeon, a fresh splatter of blood hits the floor. A rogue guard brutally kicks Cassis, boasting that he isn't scared of the prisoner even if Roxana is acting nice to him. The guard screams at him to stop glaring, but Cassis slowly looks up, his golden eye glowing with pure, terrifying, murderous intent. The terrified guard spits on the floor, backing off and claiming he's only stopping because Cassis belongs to Roxana. Cassis remembers Charlotte's insane tantrum, where she screamed that if she couldn't have him, nobody, especially Roxana, could. But thanks to that unhinged attack, Cassis finally figures out exactly how his magical shackles work. He realizes that the more a prisoner struggles, the tighter the restraints squeeze them. However, if he just stays perfectly calm, the shackles barely activate at all. Knowing this, he plots to keep his discovery a total secret so the guards will eventually lower their defenses. He momentarily wonders if Roxana already figured out the chains were practically useless now. Her mysterious behavior completely occupies his mind. He seriously questions whether he can actually trust a single word she says. Suddenly, the heavy iron doors clang open and Lant Agrich steps in to mock his prisoner. Guards immediately force Cassis to his knees, while Lant looms over him, annoyed by his defiant glare. A guard brutally thwacks Cassis across the face, sending blood flying, but Cassis just glares back with pure hatred. Lant violently stomps his expensive leather boot right onto Cassis's face, calling him an arrogant brat. Lighting a cigar, Lant casually reveals he only kidnapped Cassis instead of his sister because he figured the boy would survive the torture longer. Exhaling a cloud of smoke, the terrifying patriarch warns him not to disappoint. Lant then turns his attention to Roxana, casually bringing up her recent birthday. She plays the perfect obedient daughter, flashing a bright smile and thanking him for remembering. In a twisted father-daughter moment, Lant tosses her the dungeon keys, giving her the battered prisoner as a literal birthday gift. She catches the keys smoothly, politely thanking her dad while Cassis lays completely wrecked on the floor. A guard roughly yanks the boy up by his silver hair. Roxana puts on a wicked smirk, promising her father she'll make sure her new toy is properly trained. But the exact second her dad leaves, her smile vanishes and she orders the guards to go clean up the bloody mess. They drag the half-conscious Cassis away down the corridor. Roxana's eyes narrow. Her father has literally never remembered her birthday before, meaning this is definitely a trap. Meanwhile, the guards hauling Cassis wonder why this specific kid is getting VIP treatment from the masters. The older guard snaps at him to shut his trap before their curiosity gets them executed. They agree the kid is incredibly lucky, noting anyone else would have been fed to the dogs by now. Cassis hears all this, replaying Roxana's promise to protect him in his head. He decides only time will reveal her true motives, when suddenly Roxana's mother spots them in the hall. She frantically asks the guards who the bloody boy is and if he's dead. When they explain he's Roxana's new plaything, the mother completely gasps in utter horror. Without warning, she dashes forward, grabbing Cassis and desperately crying out the name Achille. Cassis almost snaps his eyes open, completely caught off guard by the emotional outburst. A guard awkwardly steps in, telling the lady to back away before she gets her pristine dress dirty. The guards quickly bow and hurry off, leaving the heartbroken mother staring after them. As they walk, the guards gossip, realizing the prisoner is the exact same age Achille was when he died. They figure out that's exactly why Roxana and her mom are so obsessed. He's a dead ringer for their murdered family member. They finally reach a room and just drop Cassis onto the floor like a sack of potatoes, muttering about how to patch up his near-fatal wounds. Pretending to be unconscious, Cassis pieces it all together. He realizes the Agriches are a massive, twisted family, and the deceased Achille was Roxana's older brother. He wonders if she's only keeping him alive as a cheap replacement for her dead sibling. Footsteps click into the room, and Cassis keeps his eyes glued shut. Roxana walks in, sighing heavily at the absolute bare minimum first aid the guards provided. She complains that her family has zero clue how to take care of their captives, but at least they took off his heavy chains. Leaning down, she smoothly unbuckles the tight leather collar around his neck. She starts rubbing a glowing magical ointment into his chest, warning it might sting, but Cassis is sweating bullets because it actually tickles. She finally steps back, deciding to finish the rest later since he's way too battered to run anyway. Suddenly, she starts gently stroking his hair. Cassis goes completely stiff, his mind in a total panic as he realizes his head is currently resting right on her lap. Looking away into the dark room, Roxana quietly whispers to herself that she doesn't want to die yet, making Cassis flinch at her sudden vulnerability. Roxana brushes her hand against Cassis's hair, feeling something a little strange. Leaning in close, she literally sniffs him, noting that his hair is incredibly soft and he completely lacks that gross dungeon smell. Cassis's heart does a massive batum as she bluntly asks if he's awake. He clenches his fist, realizing his cover is totally blown. He braces himself, ready to use his heavy chains to take her hostage and bolt. But suddenly, Roxana whispers a soft apology. She explains she couldn't protect him earlier because she had to fool her father, causing Cassis to instantly relax. She promises he doesn't have to worry anymore. Because he officially belongs to her now, no one is allowed to touch him without her permission. Gazing down at him, she completely plays along with his unconscious act, softly hoping he heals up soon so he can finally return home. Deciding she's done enough for now, she stands up. She slides away into the darkness, bidding him farewell. Cassis lies there completely baffled, concluding she is an insanely strange woman. A little while later, light floods the room as Roxana returns carrying a tray of food. She glances over, instantly noticing a shift in the room's vibe. Cassis is now sitting up, staring right back at her with those intense golden eyes. She sets down a hot bowl of soup, casually asking how he's feeling after the family physician patched him up. He claims he's fine, but grumbles that she could have just sent a random maid to drop off his dinner. Roxana reaches up to adjust the magical lighting, explaining she sent the maids to fetch him some fresh clothes instead. With a quick flick, the lantern sparks to life. She points out that his current outfit is basically hanging on by a thread. But internally, she knows the real truth. If a normal maid walked in here alone, Cassis would absolutely wreck her and escape. Turning back around, she offers to get him more painkillers if he needs them. But she pauses, catching a very weird look on his face. Cassis is clutching his torn shirt, blushing like crazy. She realizes he's totally flustered because he was fully awake when she was rubbing magical ointment all over his bare chest earlier. Trying to regain his cool, Cassis clenches his jaw. He drops the tough guy act and gets dead serious, asking what exactly she wants him to do now that he's officially her toy. Roxana just sighs, completely unbothered by his intense questioning. She taps the tray, demanding he just eat his soup. She tells him to get some rest and heal, playfully adding that the food isn't poisoned or anything. Cassis is left totally stunned. With that, she steps back into the sunlight and slides the door shut, promising to check on him later. True to her word, she slides the heavy iron door open again later that evening, asking how the meal was. She mentions she brought the fresh clothes, though she isn't entirely sure if they'll fit his frame. But she completely freezes. Cassis is standing right there, half naked, ripping off the last shreds of his bloody shirt to reveal a heavily scarred back. Caught off guard, Roxana's hand slips on the door frame. She aggressively slams the door wide open, internally screaming because he completely jump-scared her. Cassis casually turns around, completely shirtless and unfazed, just saying, "Hey." He lifts a chained hand, mentioning he could really use a bath. Meanwhile, Roxana is internally panicking, wondering why she's suddenly feeling so flustered by a guy she's already seen shirtless. He drops the ruined fabric onto the floor. Roxana tries to collect herself, blaming the dim, romantic candlelight for setting such a weird, heavy mood. She quickly points out the bathroom, explaining she specifically picked this private suite so he could actually have some space. But Cassis lifts his heavily chained wrists, pointing out that taking a bath is physically impossible while locked up like this. Roxana hums, getting a quick idea. She suggests swapping out the massive iron shackles for a simple collar instead. Stepping up right behind him, she reaches around his neck, causing him to flinch slightly at her cold touch. She admits it isn't ideal, but it's way better than dragging around 50 pounds of metal. Click, she locks a sleek black collar around his neck, standing dangerously close as they lock eyes. Cassis turns his head, giving her a sharp, guarded look. Roxana stares back, internally sighing because he's way more unyielding than she expected, which totally ruins the fun. Stepping back, she gives a grand wave, telling him he's good to go. She thinks this whole kidnapping situation would be a breeze if he was just mesmerized by her looks like every other guy. But looking at his serious face, she knows that isn't happening anytime soon. Before leaving, she gives him a harsh reality check. The Agrich mansion is a giant, deadly maze, Finding the exit alone is completely impossible. She strictly warns him not to leave the room unless he actively wants to get butchered by one of her psycho siblings. But then, Cassis's eyes widen as she casually drops a massive secret. She actually knows a hidden shortcut that leads straight to the outside world. As she steps out of the room, a crimson poison butterfly flutters off her finger, leaving him with her final thoughts as she silently counts on him to survive. Thanks to her magical butterfly, Roxana now has a live security feed in Cassis's room. She wants to watch him closely, but also keep things as low-key as possible. But she's slightly worried. Another butterfly she sent to the western border hasn't reported back yet, right where she figured the Fidelians would be searching. The next day, Cassis steps out of his private bath, casually drying his silver hair. Roxana notes that he looks like a completely different person now. She pats the bed next to her, telling him to come sit down so she can patch up his wounds. But Cassis crosses his arms, stubbornly insisting he can do it himself. She quickly shuts that down, pointing out he literally can't reach his own back. She pops open the medical kit, pulling out a bandage. She assures him she's an absolute expert and has been doing this since she was a kid. Cassis flinches, totally caught off guard when she casually mentions she used to patch up her brother all the time. He awkwardly scratches his head, finally dropping his stubborn act and agreeing to let her help. He turns around and smoothly lifts his shirt, exposing his heavily scarred back. He strips the shirt off entirely, revealing just how badly he was beaten. He agrees to let her help, but strictly limits her to only doing his back. He turns to make sure she understands the boundary. Roxana gently starts applying the glowing magical ointment. Her fingers ghost over his scars as she completely zones out, internally admiring how insanely beautiful his back is. Honestly, she thinks everything about him is gorgeous and is incredibly relieved she didn't let that brat Charlotte have him. Suddenly, he flinches, and she quickly apologizes for pressing too hard. Cassie sighs, quickly grabbing her wrist and firmly stating she's done enough. He pulls away, pulling his shirt back up and coldly telling her to leave so he can finish the rest himself. Roxana just stares at him, wondering if his weird reaction is just because he isn't used to a woman taking care of him. As he turns his back to fix his shirt, she gets the feeling his attitude is way less hostile than before, hoping she's actually starting to earn his trust. Standing up to leave, she promises to send a real physician in the morning to check his progress. As she slides the door shut, she wonders what exactly changed his mind about letting her treat him in the first place. Fast forward to lunchtime, Roxana carries a fresh tray of hot soup and fruit into the room. Cassis is genuinely surprised she keeps acting like his personal maid, delivering his meals herself. She brushes some hair from her face, suddenly realizing she's sweating a ton and feeling completely off. Before she can even answer him, a massive amount of blood suddenly bursts from her mouth, violently splattering onto her dress. The tray crashes to the floor, shattering everywhere. Cassis instantly springs forward to catch her as she completely collapses. Roxana's mind races, realizing the heavy dose of poison Emily gave her yesterday is officially tearing her insides apart. She forces herself to stand back up, casually wiping the blood off her chin and apologizing like she just sneezed. Cassis is absolutely speechless. She tries to brush it off, awkwardly joking that she probably just ruined his appetite. Cassis glares at her, completely serious, demanding to know why she's acting like vomiting a pint of blood is nothing. Roxana stays perfectly calm, softly explaining that this definitely isn't the first time it's happened and it certainly won't be the last. She tilts her head, genuinely confused, and asks if he's actually worried about her. Cassis immediately snaps back into his defensive shell, angrily asking why he would ever care about an enemy. He aggressively rubs his temples, letting out a heavy sigh of frustration. Running a hand through his hair, he points out that literally anyone would freak out if someone randomly coughed up blood right in front of them. Roxana wipes another drop of blood from her lip, agreeing he has a point, but noting she's just built a little differently than most people. She admits she fully expected him to hate her guts, so his sudden burst of empathy is a total shock. She remembers from the novel that Cassis acts like a wall of ice to the strong but always melts for the weak. She figures his reaction is just part of his genuinely kind nature. Giving him a soft, almost vulnerable look, she excuses herself for the day, realizing showing him her weak side might actually be the key to cracking his defenses. But the second she steps into the hall and closes the door, someone aggressively shouts her name. It's Jeremy, stomping down the hall looking incredibly annoyed, but as he gets closer, he suddenly stops dead in his tracks. His eyes lock onto the massive, fresh bloodstain, completely ruining her elegant dress. Roxana smoothly covers her mouth, playing it cool. She casually lies, claiming her new toy was being difficult, so she had to aggressively put him in his place. Jeremy totally buys it, laughing as he tries to wipe the blood off her dress, completely unbothered by the thought of Cassis getting tortured. Roxana swats his hand away, acting thoroughly disgusted by having filthy prisoner blood on her clothes, insisting she'll deal with it in her room. Changing the subject, she asks what he wants. Jeremy practically pouts, complaining he came looking for her because she wasn't in her room. Suddenly, Jeremy leans in uncomfortably close, aggressively sniffing the air around her like a bloodhound. He narrows his eyes, immediately recognizing the faint scent of the greenhouse. Roxana freezes. Jeremy points out he can literally smell the toxic plants on her. Roxana realizes if Jeremy's sharp senses caught the poison, Cassis definitely noticed it too. She mentally notes to strictly avoid the greenhouse before visiting Cassis from now on, terrified the residual poison might seriously harm him. Jeremy suddenly grabs her arm, whining that she should just completely get rid of that stupid butterfly egg. He awkwardly stammers, explaining he's totally freaked out that once the demonic thing actually hatches, she'll have to keep draining her own blood to feed it. Roxana drops her act, glaring at Jeremy with pure ice in her eyes. She strictly warns him that if he tries to meddle in her business again, she won't hold back. Jeremy completely flinches, nervously fidgeting as he insists he was only genuinely worried about her, reminding her how many people have died trying to tame those things. She knows he's right. Whoever becomes the master of the poison butterflies also becomes their literal host. If the tamer fails to provide enough blood to satisfy their hunger, the swarm will violently turn on them and devour them alive. Jeremy knows this and is genuinely terrified for her. Realizing his concern is real, Roxana softens her gaze. She sighs, softly telling him he's the only person in this twisted family who actually cares about her. She gently reaches out to pat his head, but quickly stops herself, remembering her hand is completely covered in her own blood. But Jeremy doesn't care. He grabs her bloody hand and presses it against his own head, awkwardly trying to comfort her about the butterfly situation. With the tension finally broken, they walk together down the grand hallway like nothing happened. But there is one massive secret Roxana is keeping from Jeremy. Standing in the dim light, she remembers exactly what she had to do. She casually slices open her arm, offering her blood like a daily meal. As the sunlight pours into the room, a massive, swirling tornado of crimson butterflies completely surrounds her. She smiles calmly as the demonic creatures softly flutter against her face and hair. These aren't just regular monsters. Depending on the type and strength of the poison fed to them, the butterflies can completely change their nature. Fortunately for Roxana, her swarm has developed a taste exclusively for her heavily poisoned blood. Right now, there are only a handful, but she knows that if she keeps feeding them, she'll eventually command an entire deadly army of her own. Because this is her ultimate trump card, she knows she absolutely cannot let anyone find out, not Jeremy, not her mother, and definitely not her maid, Emily. She has to keep her demonic swarm a total secret until the perfect moment, when she finally shatters Cassis's chains and helps him escape. With a quiet whisper, she commands her butterflies to head toward the western border. Standing by the glowing window, she admits this is the first time she's sent them so far away, meaning she can't instantly call them back if things go wrong. She wipes another trickle of blood from her arm, realizing that mentally controlling multiple swarms at once is taking a massive toll on her body. She lets out a heavy groan, perfectly aware she's already pushing herself way past her physical limits. But she refuses to stop. To strengthen her telepathic bond with the swarm, she knows she actually has to increase her daily dose of poison. Later, while taking a walk in the gardens, a snobby voice suddenly calls out her name. Roxana turns around, giving a polite, completely fake bow as she greets the woman. It's Maria, Lant Agrich's third wife. She stands under a frilly umbrella, dripping with fake sweetness as she compliments Roxana's beauty. Roxana internally rolls her eyes, annoyed that out of everyone in the mansion, she had to run into her. Maria, completely oblivious, brightly invites Roxana to join her for some afternoon tea. Roxana smoothly dodges the invite. She gestures gracefully, mentioning she hasn't seen her older brother Dion in a while and suggests they go invite him too. A nervous maid leans in, whispering to Maria that Dion is currently away on a mission. Roxana watches closely, perfectly aware of Maria's terrible reputation. Maria literally couldn't care less about her own son's whereabouts. Trying to save face, she awkwardly asks the maid for her name. The maid politely introduces herself as Lana. Maria flashes a sickeningly sweet smile, thanking her for the update. But the very next second, Maria's smile turns absolutely psychotic. She pulls out a hidden blade and brutally slashes the maid's throat for speaking out of turn. Blood splatters everywhere. Maria casually orders the other terrified maids to feed Lana's body to the monsters. Without missing a beat, Maria turns back to Roxana, completely unfazed, and asks if any filthy blood got on her dress. Roxana politely says no. Keeping her cool, Roxana firmly declines the tea invitation, stating she has other matters to attend to. Maria shrugs it off with a bubbly laugh, inviting Roxana to visit her room anytime so she can show off her new clothes. Roxana gives a final stiff bow and quickly walks away. As she leaves, she internally vows there is absolutely no way she is ever stepping foot near that psycho's room. Meanwhile, in another part of the mansion, Jeremy stops outside a specific door. He aggressively brushes something sticky off his sleeve, complaining about having to act as the family's exterminator. He mutters that extracting stingers from deadly pests without killing them is basically unpaid labor. He turns a corner and spots a terrified maid dragging a heavy, bloody sack down the hall. He casually asks if she's on garbage duty. The maid nods nervously. Jeremy smirks and points to the door behind him, warning her that she'll definitely die if she goes in there right now. Two maids carrying another body bow respectfully, insisting they are strong enough to handle a few monsters. But Jeremy casually asks whose orders they're following. When they say Lady Maria, Jeremy rolls his eyes, knowing the third wife specifically handpicks only the strongest maids just so they survive her psychotic mood swings longer. Unbothered, he steps aside and lazily waves them through. The heavy door slams shut behind the maids. Jeremy leans against the wall, completely bored, and casually counts down. 1, 2, 3. Instantly, the room erupts into horrifying screeches, loud thuds, and the sounds of absolute carnage. Exactly 2 minutes later, he stops counting. He shrugs with a twisted grin, reminding the empty hall that he literally warned them. The two maids are still alive, but they are trembling violently, absolutely traumatized by whatever nightmare they just survived. Without a word, they stiffly bow to Jeremy and awkwardly shuffle away to find another room, leaving him alone in the bloody corridor. Jeremy snaps at the two traumatized maids, aggressively demanding to know what they're staring at before telling them to beat it. The maids gulp in sheer terror and quickly scurry away, leaving him alone. Meanwhile, Roxana glides gracefully through the vibrant garden, her blood-stained dress swishing softly in the breeze. She spots someone ahead and playfully calls out to the old lady. It's Maria, the psychotic third wife. She turns around with a disturbingly bright smile, completely unbothered by her own blood-soaked gown, and enthusiastically greets Jeremy as he walks up behind Roxana. Jeremy gags, violently waving his hand in front of his face. He completely roasts her, calling her disgusting for slipping back into her gross habit of butchering maids for absolutely zero reason. Maria just giggles, totally unfazed by his disgust. She claps back with a sweet tone, telling Jeremy he's cute when he's mad. Jeremy practically gags again, shouting that she's a total nutjob for casually hanging out covered in fresh blood. He dramatically pinches his nose, complaining that she reeks. Maria simply smiles and completely ignores him, turning to ask Roxana if she was just at the monster hutch. Jeremy rudely tells Maria to mind her own business, but suddenly realizes what she just said. He jolts forward, asking Maria if she actually saw Roxana earlier. Maria dramatically sighs, explaining she tried to invite Roxana and Dion over for a lovely tea party. Jeremy completely ignores the tea part. He glares at Maria with pure rage, furiously reminding her that he specifically ordered her to keep Dion the hell away from Roxana. Maria innocently asks why, but Jeremy cuts her off with a dark scoff. He tells the old lady to clear the cobwebs from her ears, strictly declaring that he is the one and only brother Roxana has in her life now. He aggressively kicks the dirt, throwing an absolute tantrum because Roxana barely has time for him anymore thanks to her stupid new toy. Maria tilts her head, genuinely confused about what toy he means. Jeremy stops his tantrum, looking back at her in disbelief. He mockingly asks if she's seriously so clueless that she didn't hear about the blue air their father brought home as a birthday present. Maria's eyes widen slightly at the juicy gossip. Jeremy spits on the ground in pure disgust, complaining that Cassis is just as annoying to deal with as Dion. Maria completely ignores his whining, waving her bloody hand and ordering a hidden maid to go fetch Lowell immediately so she can find out why she wasn't updated on this drama. Before the maid can even move, Maria changes her mind, deciding to handle it herself. She playfully invites Jeremy to her room for some treats, but he angrily barks that he isn't one of her creepy dolls. As she walks away, she twirls her blood-soaked parasol, happily deciding she needs to send an official tea party invitation to Roxana. She flashes a terrifying, wide grin, practically shaking with excitement at the thought of meeting Roxana's brand new high-status toy. Later, as Roxana returns to the massive Agrich estate, one of the dungeon guards comes sprinting up the stairs, frantically calling her name. He practically throws himself into a deep bow right in front of her. Roxana recognizes him as Yon, the guard Charlotte brutally attacked during her dungeon tantrum. She smoothly plays the caring lady, hoping Charlotte wasn't too rough on him. Yon immediately blushes bright red, absolutely honored that she remembered his name and stammers out that he's totally fine. He awkwardly reaches behind his back and pulls out a small bouquet of vibrant purple flowers, offering them to her as a humble gift. Roxana gives a soft chuckle, her eyes sparkling as she accepts the unexpected present. Yon's heart basically hammers out of his chest. He visibly trembles, blurting out that he knows they aren't nearly as beautiful as her, but it would mean the world to him if she kept them. Roxana lowers her face toward the bouquet, burying her nose in the petals as a soft, almost wicked smile spreads across her lips. Later that night, Roxana slides open the heavy dungeon door, carrying a candle and the purple flowers. Cassis glances up from his chains, noting she seems to be in an unusually good mood. She holds the bouquet close, her eyes gleaming. She casually admits she doesn't actually care for flowers, but these specific ones are undeniably pretty. She steps closer to Cassis, plucking a single petal and letting it drift to the floor, softly mentioning that it's just too bad they don't last long. With a sly grin, she holds out the bouquet and casually asks if he wants them. Cassis reaches out to touch the soft petals, assuming it was just a regular gift someone gave her. He notes out loud that they aren't very fragrant. But the exact second his skin makes contact with the flower, Cassis completely freezes. He drops his hand, staring at her intensely, and strictly demands to know exactly who gave her this bouquet. Roxana plays dumb, smoothly answering that it was just one of her father's guards. She knows exactly what these are. They are highly classified, genetically modified poisonous flowers developed by the Agrich family. They are so new they don't even have an official name yet. Even a brief touch is enough to induce mild paralysis, sending a harsh tingle through the victim's hands and feet. But because the experiment mostly failed to create a lethal dose, the flowers were totally scrapped. She tilts her head, acting surprised, and asks Cassis if he somehow already knows about the secret poison. Cassis quickly covers his tracks, vaguely muttering that he gets weird gifts from time to time. He firmly tells her to just leave them in the corner. Roxana shrugs, telling him he doesn't have to keep them if he doesn't want to. But Cassis quickly changes his tune, looking away and awkwardly claiming the dreary dungeon could actually use some decoration. Deciding to move on, Roxana casually reaches into her dress to pull something out. Cassis completely panics, blushing fiercely and covering his eyes like an absolute gentleman. Roxana pauses, genuinely confused by his reaction. She pulls out a folded piece of parchment, completely unbothered, asking where else she was supposed to safely hide a secret document. Cassis drops his hand, awkwardly scratching his head to cover his massive embarrassment, and asks what she brought. Roxana gives a triumphant grin. She gracefully kneels on the floor, spreading out massive, highly detailed architectural blueprints of the entire Agrich estate. She strictly orders him to memorize them quickly because she has to burn them before she leaves. She taps a specific spot on the map, showing him exactly where his dungeon cell is located, and traces her finger along the absolute shortest route to the exit. She softly admits she is likely the only person in the entire family who even knows this secret path exists, having stumbled upon it by total accident. Cassis stares down at the blueprints, his golden eyes wide with shock as he realizes she is actually handing him a completely viable, top-secret escape route right out of the mansion. Roxana confirms it, giving him a sly smile. But she warns him there is one slight problem with using the secret path. She asks if he memorized the whole thing. Cassis nods firmly. The exact second he does, she tosses the blueprint right into her candle, watching it instantly flare up. The paper completely crackles and burns to ash right in front of him, making sure no one else can ever find it. Next, she taps the purple flowers, casually dropping the bomb that they are highly poisonous. Cassis stays quiet. He already figured out they were toxic from the faint scent, but he had absolutely no clue what they actually did to a human body. He wonders if Lant Agrich gave them to her, but why would the sadistic patriarch randomly gift his own daughter a deadly bouquet? He quickly connects the dots, wondering if her constant exposure to these toxic plants is the real reason she violently vomited blood the other day. He looks down at his glowing hand, realizing his holy powers are completely useless while trapped in these demonic shackles. In frustration, he shatters the magical energy, tossing the useless shards onto the floor. Meanwhile, Lance's booming voice echoes through his grand office, asking Roxana if her new toy has learned to behave yet. Roxana nods respectfully, smoothly lying that Cassis is getting better every single day. Lance smirks, swirling a glass of liquor. He notes the toy means a lot to her, especially since he gave it to her personally. He promises she'll have a lot of fun once the kid's broken parts are fixed. Staring at her, Lant flashes a wicked grin, admitting that the more he looks at her, the more she reminds him of himself. He takes a sip of his drink, chuckling that she has certainly changed a lot since she was a soft-hearted kid. He casually slams his glass down, trying to remember the name of her good-for-nothing dead brother, incorrectly guessing Asher. Lighting up a fresh cigar, Lant blows out a cloud of smoke. He complains that he had high expectations for the boy, but he turned out to be completely useless and a terrible influence on her. Roxana clenches her dress tightly, her knuckles turning white as she corrects him. His name was Achille. But she forces a massive, completely fake grin, smoothly adding that it doesn't matter since Achille died a dishonorable death anyway. She stands up, coldly declaring that her brother means absolutely nothing to her now. Giving a perfect, elegant bow, she claims she is a proud Agrich and looks up to Lant more than anyone else in the world. Later, back in her room, she dismisses her maid, Emily. The second the door clicks shut, her perfect posture completely crumbles. She dramatically flops onto a chair, absolutely exhausted by the mental gymnastics. She rubs her temples, groaning that dealing with both psychotic Maria and Lant on the exact same day is completely draining her life force. She wishes she could just take a nap, but knows that definitely isn't happening today. Suddenly, a familiar red butterfly flutters through the open window, returning from its long mission. She holds out her finger, letting the glowing insect land, and asks what it saw at the western border. Instantly, a dark vision floods her mind. The vision shows a totally silent, bloody forest under a blood-red moon. Massive crows caw loudly, swarming over countless slaughtered bodies scattered across the ground. Standing right in the middle of the massacre is a dark-haired man covered in fresh blood. Roxana violently stumbles back, completely shocked by the horrifying image. She gasps in absolute terror. It's Dion, Lance's favorite son, the undisputed #1 at the banquets, and the most utterly vicious psychopath out of all her siblings. Her mind races. Factoring in the time difference from the border, if the butterfly is just now returning with this vision, that means Dion could arrive back at the mansion at literally any second. She aggressively slams her fist against the wall, cursing under her breath. Dion is always exactly one step ahead of her. She realizes Lant must have specifically ordered him to exterminate the search party at the border. The bodies in her vision weren't just random guards. They were absolutely the elite men sent by the Fidelians to rescue Cassis. She quickly heads down to the dungeon, knowing she has to warn Cassis immediately before Dion shows up and ruins everything. She slides the heavy door open but completely freezes in her tracks. Cassis looks up, his golden eyes glowing dangerously in the dim light. She gulps, hesitating for a split second, wondering if telling him his rescue party was just slaughtered is actually a terrible idea. She quickly covers it up, assuring him the Fidelians won't give up that easily and promising to increase her surveillance near the borders. She tells him to get well soon and quickly exits. Cassis stares after her, totally confused by her sudden, frantic visit. The very next day, a massive rainstorm completely floods the estate. Roxana is rushing back from secretly feeding her butterfly egg when the downpour hits. Soaking wet, she stops under an archway, annoyed that she got caught in the rain. She notes she never visits Cassis during the day, meaning her schedule is totally thrown off. She admits she's been completely distracted ever since she found out Dion is on his way back. She decides to just head back to her room to dry off. But as she turns the corner, her eyes blow wide open in absolute paralyzing terror. Standing right there in the pouring rain, blood dripping from his dark clothes, is the one person she desperately wanted to avoid. She instantly forces her face into a perfect, welcoming smile, completely masking her sheer panic. But before she can even speak, Dion violently grabs her. He pulls her in close, his terrifying red eyes glowing in the storm, and immediately demands to know why she's injured. He brutally asks if her precious poison butterflies did this to her. Roxana's heart completely stops, Dion knows. Trying to play it cool, she stammers, asking when he got back from his mission. He coldly replies, just now. Without warning, Dion violently grabs her heavily bandaged arm. He completely crushes her wrist, aggressively noting that he thought her last butterfly egg hadn't hatched yet. Roxana forcefully yanks her arm free, her eyes glowing with defiance as she tells Dion to let go. Dion coldly mentions he heard Cassis is her new toy. Roxana shoots back that word sure travels fast, sarcastically noting he's never cared about household gossip before. He steps closer in the pouring rain, his voice dangerously low as he admits the news only caught his attention because it concerns her. Roxana completely scoffs, calling his sudden interest entirely stupid. She turns her back on him, leaving him standing in the storm as she heads back inside the massive, gloomy mansion. Meanwhile, down in the dungeon, Cassis stares at his trembling hand. He realizes with absolute relief that his holy strength is finally starting to return. Pushing himself off the cold floor, he does a push-up, confident that as long as he avoids aggravating his wounds, he'll be back in fighting shape in no time. He wipes the sweat from his forehead, hyping himself up that he'll be breaking out of this hellhole very soon. Suddenly, the heavy iron door slides open with a loud slam. He starts to say her name but completely freezes, his golden eyes widening in shock. Cassis notes that Dion has always been a terrifying mystery, completely cold and emotionless. He genuinely wonders if anyone in this twisted world could ever evoke a single drop of real emotion from him. But his train of thought snaps back to reality. Cassis listens intently, wondering if Dion is still lurking out in the hallway. He realizes he can't hear a single footstep, meaning the psycho might just be standing there silently. He starts to panic slightly, thinking Dion might be waiting in ambush for the exact second he tries to leave the room. Suddenly, multiple loud thumps echo from above. He looks up just as Roxana literally falls through a hidden trapdoor in the ceiling, dropping right into the cell. She quickly stands up, completely out of breath, as Cassis asks when he got so close to her. Roxana wipes the sweat from her forehead, completely stressed out. She admits she wasn't thinking straight because of Dion and accidentally led him right to her. Cassis quickly points out that she needs to stop her bleeding first. She looks down at her arm, realizing the wound from feeding the butterfly is completely oozing fresh blood. She curses Dion under her breath, annoyed that she can't even clean herself up properly. Cassis immediately steps up and offers to help her clean it. She hesitates, wondering if she should just leave since she was planning on heading to her room anyway. But the terrifying thought of Dion still standing right outside the door makes her bite her lip. She admits she doesn't actually want to leave just yet. Cassis awkwardly fumbles with his shirt, gently suggesting she should sit down while he helps. He turns to grab a cloth, firmly telling her she's bleeding way too much to just walk around like that. She finally gives in, sitting down as he hands her a clean towel to properly wrap the wound. He quickly tosses a cushion onto the floor, showing surprising care so she doesn't have to sit on the cold, wet stone. But he catches her staring intently at him. He awkwardly sweats, wondering if he accidentally did something wrong. Suddenly, she tosses his torn shirt right back at him, bluntly telling him to use it to cover himself up. He awkwardly catches it, thanking her. Roxana glances away, casually noting her own dress isn't even that revealing, so there's really nothing to cover. But as he blushes furiously, she internally smiles, thinking his flustered reaction is actually incredibly cute. Changing the subject, she teases him about his terrible bandaging skills, pointing out she thought he said he had experience. Cassis awkwardly defends himself, claiming he usually does a great job, but the fabric just unraveled this time. He sighs in defeat, finally asking her to just let him help. She holds out her bloody arm and he gently takes her hand, carefully lifting it to inspect the damage. Roxana watches him closely, internally noting that he is acting unusually gentle and nice today. He expertly wraps the bandage around her forearm, noting the clean slice looks like it came from a blade. Roxana silently curses herself for not covering it up better. He continues to carefully treat the wound. Roxana finds it fascinating how quickly he's letting his guard down around her. She remembers from the novel that Cassis absolutely cherishes his family, especially his little sister, Sylvia. Looking him dead in the eye, she bluntly tells him he reminds her of her big brother. She softly adds that the only reason he's softening up to her is because she reminds him of Sylvia. Cassis pauses, his golden eyes wide, realizing she hit the nail directly on the head. Roxana flashes a knowing, almost wicked grin, having completely read his deepest emotional weakness. Suddenly, she leans in uncomfortably close, grabbing his shoulders and softly whispering that she desperately needs his help. She swoops in, practically pinning him against the wall, and asks if he doesn't think it's been awfully peaceful for a little too long. With a swift, fluid motion, she forcefully pushes him back, reminding him that they still don't fully trust each other. She boldly declares they need a safety device between them to guarantee neither betrays the other. Before he can react, she completely straddles him on the floor. Cassis is completely paralyzed, his eyes wide as he gulps nervously, having absolutely no clue what she is about to do. Roxana leans down, her red eyes glowing with intense determination. She softly tells him not to hate her for this, and immediately plants a deep, forceful kiss right on his lips. Cassis is completely thrown off guard, forcefully pushing her back by her shoulders in pure shock. He glares at her, his face flushed red, and aggressively demands to know what the hell she thinks she's doing. But Roxana just smirks. She notes the faint red lipstick mark now stained on his neck, internally praising him for remaining a complete gentleman even while totally panicked. She slowly rises, completely unbothered by his outburst, confident that her wild gamble to secure his absolute loyalty just paid off perfectly. She glances down at him one last time, completely unsurprised by his intense, flustered reaction, knowing she finally has him exactly where she wants him. Roxana gently cups his face, softly warning him to try and relax even if it hurts. Before Cassis can even process what's happening, she suddenly leans in and sinks her teeth right into his neck. He violently clenches his fists, completely caught off guard as she smoothly promises he won't have to lift a single finger. His entire body tenses up, his hands twitching as he desperately tries to hold back a groan of pain. She continues her punishment, leaving a deep, undeniable mark on his skin to completely fool her father's spies. Finally pulling away, Cassis collapses back, completely flushed and panting heavily while she casually thanks him for his cooperation. She flashes a wicked grin, highly satisfied that her wild little stunt worked perfectly. Later, at an elegant garden tea party, Roxana watches the scene unfold with absolute disgust. Seeing her terrified mother sitting next to the psychotic Maria reminds her way too much of Lant and Dion's twisted dynamic. She coldly remembers the brutal truth from 5 years ago. Her brother Achille was literally slaughtered for failing his exam, and the one who personally executed him was Dion himself. It's the main reason she absolutely despises the family's top assassin. The other reason, Dion is the only person in the entire world who has ever seen her truly weak and broken. Back then, she had desperately grabbed a sword, screaming at him to get lost with tears streaming down her face. Snapping back to the present, she realizes tears are actually falling from her eyes. She desperately tries to convince herself it's just her imagination, but then she hallucinates a vision of her dead brother. Her mind spirals into a dark place, wondering what horrific horrors Achilles saw right before he was killed. She violently shakes off the memory, drawing her mental blade and making an unbreakable vow that she will never let anyone she cares about die by Dion's hands ever again. Suddenly, a maid snaps her out of it, handing her an official tea party invitation from Lady Maria. Roxana sighs, remembering Jeremy recently whining and apologizing for accidentally leaking the news about Cassis to the crazy third wife. The invitation literally demands she bring her favorite toy along, but Roxana has zero plans of bringing Cassis anywhere near that psycho. Standing by the window, she heavily dreads the upcoming event scheduled for tomorrow. This will only be her second time attending one of Maria's twisted little get-togethers. She internally prays the afternoon goes smoothly without any major bloodbaths. The next day, Maria enthusiastically welcomes her to the glass greenhouse, while Roxana's mother, Sierra, sits nearby looking absolutely terrified. Roxana forces a polite grin, thanking Maria for the invite. She elegantly greets her mother, who practically jumps out of her skin in response. Sierra nervously stammers that she had no idea she was coming, but Maria smoothly chimes in, claiming she wanted it to be a fun little surprise. Roxana watches the dynamic perfectly. Maria is a venomous snake, and her mother is a helpless little mouse too terrified to ever say no. She pities her mother's weakness in a family where fathers literally order children to butcher each other. Maria dramatically sighs, loudly complaining that the party would be way more fun if Roxana had actually brought her new pet. She admits she only caught a glimpse of him but thinks he's the prettiest toy ever. She even brought a literal human-sized birdcage for him to sit in. Taking a sip of tea, Maria casually asks if Roxana is actively drugging the blue air yet. Roxana plays along, flashing a wicked smile. She claims she's contemplating it, but if he becomes too obedient, she might get bored and kill him too quickly. She smoothly adds that she wants to keep her very first toy for as long as possible, leaving her poor mother absolutely horrified by the dark conversation. Maria completely agrees, casually chatting about how heavy drugs ruin the fun, noting she personally hates the rebellious ones. Suddenly, Maria loudly claps her hands, demanding everyone's attention to show off the newest addition to her twisted collection. Roxana's eyes narrow as a girl named Lowell is dragged in by heavy iron chains. And this is exactly why Roxana hates these parties. Lowell's face is horrifyingly disfigured and stitched up like an actual Frankenstein monster. Maria sadistically turns to Roxana's mother, asking what she thinks of the new pet. She proudly waves her hand, asking if the mutilated girl isn't just the cutest thing ever. Sierra shakes like a leaf, completely traumatized, but forces herself to agree just to avoid making Maria mad. Maria happily tells the mangled doll that Sierra likes her, ordering her to go pour their guest a nice cup of tea. Roxana suppresses a shudder while Maria practically cackles with evil glee. Sierra sits there paralyzed with fear as the stitched-up girl awkwardly shuffles closer with the heavy teapot. Lowell gives a terrifying, disjointed smile as she tips the porcelain pot forward. But her mangled hands slip. Boiling hot tea aggressively splashes everywhere, making Sierra shriek in terror. Sierra jumps up in a panic. Maria immediately fakes concern, gasping and asking if she got burned. But the very next second, Maria slams her hands on the table. She glares at Lowell with pure, unhinged rage, screaming at her for making a mistake and threatening severe punishment. Seeing the girl about to be tortured, Sierra desperately clutches the tablecloth. Trembling violently, Sierra bravely lies, insisting that the spill was entirely her own fault so the poor girl won't get brutally punished. Maria smiles sickeningly, praising Sierra for being such a sweetheart. However, she states she absolutely cannot let the maid's mistake slide. Maria's eyes widen with a twisted gleam as she reminds everyone that the clumsy girl almost burned Sierra's precious hand. Without hesitating, Maria coldly orders the guards to take Lowell out back and immediately execute her. Roxana realizes things are escalating way too quickly. Moving fast, her hand accidentally slips, forcefully shoving her teacup off the table where it shatters into pieces. She loudly gasps, faking absolute panic, and tells her mother her hand is turning completely red. She frantically suggests she needs cold water and maybe even a doctor. Maria immediately buys the act. She gasps dramatically, totally agreeing with Roxana and insisting she doesn't want anything bad to happen to Sierra. With the distraction perfectly executed, Roxana smoothly orders a nearby butler to escort her mother out of the greenhouse. But right as her mother is safely escorted away, horrifying, guttural screeches erupt from the massive glass monster cages surrounding them. Maria doesn't even flinch. She just laughs, excitedly betting that the monsters will tear the brunette apart first. She casually adds that Lowell is probably so drugged up she won't even feel the pain when she gets eaten alive. Roxana takes a calm sip of her tea, completely disgusted. She internally curses these people as absolute savages, just incredibly relieved she got her mother out of there before the bloodbath started. Suddenly, the main greenhouse doors burst open. Two guards practically sprint inside, screaming in absolute panic that they have a massive situation. Lady Roxana's toy has escaped. Roxana nearly drops her teacup, her mind completely racing. She demands to know exactly how Cassis broke free from his heavy chains and escaped a locked room. The guards stammer out an explanation. They were literally in the middle of bringing him to the tea party when he suddenly overpowered them and made a run for it. Roxana's eyes widen and she instantly shatters her teacup on the floor. She glares at the guards with pure fury, demanding to know who gave them permission to fetch her toy. The terrified guard quickly explains that Master Dion specifically requested it, so they assumed she had agreed. Roxana is absolutely livid, realizing Dion completely bypassed her to drag Cassis out into the open. She orders the guards to kneel instantly, threatening to cut their heads off for making her look like a fool. Shaking with anger, she forces them to spill where Cassis was last seen. They squeak out that he was spotted in the southwest hallway and that Master Jeremy is already actively hunting him down. Roxana immediately calls for Emily, commanding her to go after them right now. Turning to Maria, Roxana forces a strained smile, politely excusing herself. Maria looks slightly annoyed, asking if she needs any help catching her pet. Roxana quickly declines, insisting she hates misunderstandings, especially when Dion is involved. At the mention of the psycho's name, Maria visibly breaks out in a cold sweat. But before anyone can say another word, the entire greenhouse starts violently shaking. The ground literally trembles as a massive, horrifying shadow looms over the glass ceiling. Everyone screams in absolute terror as a giant Carental, a massive, deadly spider monster, smashes its way onto the roof. The guards shout for everyone to run. Roxana casually adjusts her black veil, sighing heavily. It looks like she has to exterminate this massive bug before she can even start looking for Cassis. The monstrous spider screeches, its weight causing the heavy glass ceiling to completely crack and buckle right above them. A panicked maid runs up, screaming that there's been a massive breach in Monster Hutch number 5, which isn't far from where they are. Roxana ignores the chaos, telling the maid to just get everyone to safety. Meanwhile, she desperately wonders what the hell is happening outside. More importantly, she's completely panicked about Cassis, knowing he's running around the maze-like mansion completely unarmed. Suddenly, the glass ceiling completely caves in. Massive shards rain down as the terrifying Carental drops right into the middle of the tea party. 30 minutes earlier, right before the chaos started, Cassis had easily overpowered the two guards, slamming one into the ground with his heavy boot. He glares down at the squirming guard, furiously demanding to know why they were even following Dion's orders in the first place, completely pissed off that Dion is messing with him. Cassis warns the guard that if this whole tea party setup is just another one of Dion's twisted tricks, they're both completely screwed. But before Cassis can finish, Jeremy suddenly drops from the ceiling. He violently tackles the guard to the ground, absolutely raging, and screams at the guy to get up and go ask Roxana again. Jeremy is practically foaming at the mouth, refusing to believe Roxana would ever agree to bring her toy to Maria's disgusting party. But as Jeremy turns around, his eyes instantly lock onto the dark, prominent marks covering Cassis's neck. Jeremy completely freezes. He points directly at Cassis, scoffing in absolute disgust, and demands the asshole come closer. Cassis glares back, completely unfazed, asking why he should ever listen to a brat like him. In a flash of pure rage, Jeremy winds up and completely decks Cassis right in the jaw. Jeremy crackles with dark energy, mockingly telling Cassis to get a load of himself. He arrogantly claims he could have easily finished him off with one blow if he really wanted to. But Cassis quickly recovers from the punch. Seeing that the kid is completely unhinged, he decides this isn't worth his time and immediately bolts down the hallway. Jeremy absolutely loses his mind, shouting for the guards that the blue-haired rat is making a run for it. He's furious that the prisoner actually has the guts to escape right in front of him. Cassis sprints down the corridor, quickly realizing Jeremy's game. Since Cassis belongs to Roxana, Jeremy knows he can't officially punish him without an excuse, so he's forcing Cassis to act like a fugitive to justify an attack. Cassis smirks, noting that literally no one in this family is sane. But honestly, a chaotic chase is way better than being locked in a cage. Jeremy grins like an absolute psycho, eagerly chasing after the disobedient shithead. He's completely ready to teach him a brutal lesson. Cassis easily dodges Jeremy's attacks, using his heavy chains to completely deflect the kid's strikes. Jeremy screams at him to stop running and fight like a real man. With a swift, powerful pull, Cassis uses the chains to block another hit, the metal clashing loudly against Jeremy's weapon. But Cassis quickly realizes the heavy metal shackles are seriously slowing down his movements and draining his stamina. He takes a quick breather, telling himself he needs to stay calm. He looks back at Jeremy, casually telling the kid to man up and back off. Jeremy grits his teeth, totally frustrated. He fully admits Cassis is way faster and more skilled than he expected. While backing away, Jeremy's foot accidentally bumps into a heavy stone switch hidden on the floor. Instantly, a massive cloud of dark, toxic smoke erupts from the walls. Jeremy chuckles, deciding to see who has the last laugh, while Cassis completely leaps back to avoid the poisonous trap. Out of the toxic smoke, a horrifying, multi-eyed monster lets out an ear-piercing screech. Cassis quickly covers his mouth to block the poison, realizing Jeremy literally summoned the beasts. Jeremy just grins, casually mentioning it's his job to feed them. But his cocky attitude backfires instantly as a massive spider leg completely pierces through his shoulder, sending him flying. The beast looms over the terrified kid, ready to snap him in half as Jeremy desperately screams for help. Without hesitating, Cassis charges in, driving a heavy spear right through the monster's eye and absolutely wrecking the creature. Jeremy scrambles back, completely fumbling for words as he stares at the guy he just tried to kill. Cassis glances over his shoulder, completely unbothered as Jeremy actually stutters out a tiny thank you. Cassis internally debates his actions. He knows he has absolutely zero reason to help an enemy, but he also refuses to just stand there and watch a dying kid. Later, Jeremy is casually hanging upside down from a tree, comparing Cassis to a cockroach for surviving the brutal monster ambush. He stares at Cassis's heavy shackles, completely baffled by how the blue air is still standing after fighting off a whole swarm. Flipping down from the branch, Jeremy acts like they're totally cool now, brushing off the near-death experience. He rubs his head and laughs, admitting he was a little reckless and would have been in massive trouble if Cassis had actually died. Cassis completely snaps. He grips his spear, furiously shouting that none of this would have happened if Jeremy hadn't unleashed the monsters in the first place. But Jeremy just glares right back with crazy eyes, telling him he should have stayed in his cage like a nice, obedient little toy. Suddenly, a heavy, blood-soaked sword drags across the dirt, paired with a chilling voice asking what all the ruckus is about. Jeremy clicks his tongue, instantly annoyed, while Cassis gulps, feeling an overwhelming dark aura approaching. Out of the shadows steps a tall, imposing man, casually asking Jeremy if he picked up a new hobby without telling him. Cassis stares in shock. The guy looks exactly like Lant Agrich, just a much younger, deadlier version. Jeremy spits on the ground, completely disgusted, stating that just looking at the guy makes him want to puke. From up in the tree, Jeremy looks down as the man calmly asks if he was the one who opened the monster hutch. The newcomer's red eyes narrow. He calls Jeremy reckless and pathetic, warning the kid that his wild stunts aren't cute anymore. Jeremy completely loses his mind, clenching his teeth and screaming at the dickhead for lecturing him. The dark-haired man shouts right back, blaming Jeremy for this entire mess because he snuck Roxana's toy out without her permission. Dion's gaze turns ice cold as he figures out that Maria must be scheming something behind the scenes again. He shifts his terrifying eyes to Cassis, mocking the noble blue air for strutting around like a horny little dog. Cassis's heart completely drops as Dion casually brags about wiping out an entire search party not too long ago, confirming he slaughtered the Fidelian rescue squad. Dion casually notes they were super persistent, while Cassis grips his weapon so hard his knuckles turn white. Dion smirks, acting disappointed that Cassis isn't throwing a massive fit after hearing his men were butchered. Flashing a sinister smile, Dion promises Cassis he'll be seeing his dead men very soon. With a lightning-fast leap, Dion strikes. Cassis perfectly flips backward, using his spear to block the massive sword with a heavy clang. Dion lands gracefully, his cape fluttering around him like an absolute boss. Cassis slides back, keeping his distance and holding his defensive stance against the deadly assassin. Dion sarcastically praises his moves, but internally thinks Cassis isn't even trying his best. He correctly guesses that Cassis is smart enough to realize he can't win this fight head-on, so he's just stalling. Dion points out that Cassis isn't trying to kill him because he knows someone else is supposed to do that job. Cassis grits his teeth, realizing Dion purposely lured him here to trap him. Dion laughs, admitting it's a shame since his men worked so hard to set traps up ahead. But suddenly, a panicked voice screams Roxana's name. Roxana comes sprinting into the clearing, completely out of breath and clutching her dress as she searches for Cassis. Cassis stares at her, flashing back to his dead brother, totally confused as to why she's out here instead of the greenhouse. He wonders if something terrible happened to make her run all the way out here. Roxana stops dead in her tracks, her eyes wide with sheer terror as she finally spots Dion standing right there. But before anyone can speak, a horrifying green monster scuttles out of the bushes directly behind her. Without a second thought, Dion swings his massive sword, rushing to intercept the beast. Cassis realizes Dion is completely distracted. This is his one and only golden opportunity to make a break for it. But as Dion knocks the monster back, the massive bug is violently flung right toward Roxana. Cassis's eyes blow wide open. He completely abandons his escape plan, his body moving on autopilot. He grips his spear, cursing because he knows he can't physically run fast enough to reach her in time. Knowing he has to aim higher, he targets the beast's head and launches himself into the air. With absolute precision, he throws his spear like a missile, completely impaling the monster right before it crushes Roxana. Cassis lands hard on the ground, rolling to break his fall, but immediately gets violently yanked back by the heavy recoil of his own chains. Dion calmly steps forward, casually pinning Cassis to the ground by stepping right onto his spear. Suddenly, bright blue electrical sparks crackle wildly from the heavy iron chains on Cassis's wrists. Dion coldly stares down at him. Cassis is completely paralyzed by the magical shock, practically short-circuiting as he collapses completely unconscious. Before Dion can make another move, Jeremy comes sprinting in like a madman, desperately calling out to ask if Sierra got hurt. Sierra clutches her face, completely hysterical and screaming at Dion to stop. She shakes violently in absolute terror, pleading with the assassin not to kill Achille, completely confusing Cassis with her dead son. Dion ignores her, shifting his weight to completely snap Cassis's spear right in half. Roxana finally catches her breath and steps out from the trees, casually asking Dion what he thinks he's doing. She steps in front of him, waving him off. But then, a fiercely loyal maid steps forward from the shadows, declaring she can handle the situation and ordering Roxana to step back. It's Emily. Roxana knows Emily has a terrifying, forbidden power that literally drains her lifespan every time she uses it. Roxana firmly orders her to stand down and not use her abilities. Suddenly, another sister steps out of the chaos. It's Griselda, Roxana's older half-sister, casually resting her high heel right on the dead monster's head. She smirks and holds out a broken iron rod from the shattered cage, offering it to Emily as a makeshift weapon. Griselda confidently declares she'll take care of the monsters running wild outside the greenhouse, glancing back to casually ask Roxana if she needs any help. Roxana politely declines, brushing the whole horrific scene off as just another one of Jeremy's terrible pranks. A nearby guard nervously kicks away the severed head of the Carental. Roxana warns Griselda to hurry before her new toy gets damaged beyond repair. Looking down at Cassis's unconscious body, Roxana sighs. She admits she totally expected something like this to happen, knowing he'd try to escape. But as she stares down at him, her eyes completely soften with genuine confusion. She glances up at Dion, mentally kicking herself. Out of everyone in the mansion, she never expected the family's top assassin to be the one to intercept Cassis. Jeremy finally calms down, confusedly asking Roxana what her mother is even doing out here. Sierra is still kneeling in the dirt, completely traumatized and sobbing into her hands. Roxana gently kneels beside her, explaining that she probably came looking for her out of worry. Jeremy nervously nods, pointing out it's way too dangerous right now and telling Roxana to quickly take her mother inside. But Sierra is totally lost in her own world, frantically asking if the monster attacked her. Sierra looks up past Roxana, her eyes locking onto Dion standing silently by the dead beast. Completely unhinged by trauma, Sierra gives a manic, wide-eyed smile and praises Dion for killing the monster, happily declaring she's never been more proud of him in her life. Jeremy absolutely snaps. He screams at Sierra, shouting that she has to be kidding him. He aggressively points at Dion, furiously exposing that the assassin was the one who actually hurled the monster at Roxana in the first place. Maria, who just arrived on the scene, acts completely shocked by the accusation. Sierra clutches Roxana tighter, shaking her head in denial. Still hallucinating, Sierra softly pleads with Dion not to kill Achille. Cassis lies perfectly still, his breathing shallow. Sierra's panic completely spirals. Tears stream down her face as she violently shakes, screaming at Dion to spare her dead son. Maria steps up, totally faking her outrage. She yells at Dion, blaming him for completely breaking Sierra's mind again by executing Achille all those years ago. Dion's expression doesn't even flicker. He simply winds up and brutally backhands Maria right across the face. The loud slap echoes through the ruined greenhouse. Roxana slowly stands up, her eyes glowing with pure fury. She coldly points out that not only did Maria try to sabotage her by stealing her toy, but she purposely put her mother in extreme danger. Roxana clenches her fists, her blood boiling as she vows she will never forgive Maria for this stunt. But Dion suddenly speaks up, casually rubbing his cheek and asking if this hostility is the thanks he gets. He chuckles, a dark, twisted smirk spreading across his face, and sarcastically asks if she's really mad at him just for capturing her runaway dog. Roxana glares at him with absolute venom, spitting back that she never asked for his help. She firmly declares that Cassis belongs exclusively to her, making her the only person allowed to punish him. She commands Dion to step aside immediately. Dion actually smirks, highly amused by her fiery attitude. He takes a step back, casually agreeing to let it go this time. He surprisingly reaches out and gently wipes a tiny speck of blood from Roxana's cheek, softly admitting he had way more fun than he expected today. Leaning in dangerously close, he whispers that he hasn't seen her this angry in a long time, and honestly it puts him in a great mood. But his eyes go completely dead as he adds that he'd enjoy it even more if she completely broke down and cried like the last time he made her watch him kill. Jeremy totally loses it. He screams at Dion, calling him an asshole, and furiously demands he get away from Roxana, threatening to kill him right then and there. Sometime later, after the chaos finally settles, a maid formally reports to Roxana. As ordered, she severely punished the guards who let Cassis slip out of the cell. But the maid hesitates, revealing that when she went to gather the guards, some were already completely dead. She assumes the escaped monsters brutally killed them in the hallway. Because of the slaughter, they can't interrogate the guards to definitively prove if Dion was actually behind the setup. Roxana casually lifts her teacup, coldly noting that dead men can't speak. The maid adds that a few surviving servants claim it was actually Lady Maria's idea. According to the rumor, Maria forged Dion's orders to steal the toy, but completely abandoned the plan the second the monsters broke loose. Roxana smirks into her teacup, finding the entire messy situation incredibly interesting. In a massive plot twist, Roxana internally reveals the truth. She was the one who forged Dion's orders to bring Cassis to the greenhouse. She admits things got way more chaotic than planned, but she's perfectly fine with the results, though she never expected Jeremy to accidentally release the monsters. Even if Cassis had kept running, he wouldn't have escaped. The secret blueprints she made him memorize were completely fake. She specifically set the trap to prove he couldn't survive without her help, but instead of running, he completely threw away his only chance at freedom to jump back in and save her mother. The maid bows, asking what Lady Roxana wants as a punishment for the runaway prisoner. Roxana coldly orders him thrown into the notorious hallucination room. The maid agrees and quickly exits. Moments later, someone knocks softly on the heavy double doors, announcing they have an urgent message from Lady Sierra. Roxana turns around as a very nervous young maid steps inside, bowing deeply. The maid stammers that Sierra is finally awake and specifically asking for her, but since she's still too weak to leave her bed, she sent the maid instead. Roxana sets her teacup down with a soft click, standing up and agreeing to pay her mother a visit. Entering Sierra's lavish bedroom, Roxana politely asks if she's feeling okay. Sierra sits up against her pillows, looking absolutely exhausted but claiming she's fine. Sierra quickly changes the subject, her eyes filled with genuine concern as she asks if Roxana was hurt when the monsters broke into the greenhouse. Roxana raises a hand, gently asking her mother to calm down. She gives a reassuring smile, smoothly assuring Sierra that she isn't hurt at all and doesn't have a single scratch on her. Sierra lets out a massive sigh of relief. But then, she completely catches Roxana off guard by asking what she was even doing outside during the attack, noting she thought Roxana was safely in her room. Roxana's eyes slightly narrow, playing dumb as she asks if her mother didn't hear the loud alarm about the monster breach. Sierra looks away nervously, admitting she did hear the warnings and knew it happened near the greenhouse. Sierra clutches her blankets, softly explaining that she only ran out there because she was so worried about her. Roxana's heart does a slight throb at the confession. But the heartfelt moment shatters instantly. Roxana flashes a cold, almost cruel grin and bluntly states. Roxana's fake smile instantly vanishes, replaced by a cold, deadly glare as she coldly whispers that she really wishes Sierra hadn't done that. Sierra stammers, completely taken aback as Roxana heavily sighs. Roxana asks her mother what she possibly could have done to help back at the greenhouse. She cruelly points out that between the two of them, Sierra is the one currently bedridden just from the sheer shock of seeing the monsters. Roxana stands over her mother's bed, coldly stating that she is absolutely fine and Sierra should only be worrying about herself right now. She leans in closer, tightening her grip on her dress, and brutally asks if Sierra genuinely believes she'd be capable of saving her if they had actually been in danger. She even suggests someone could have easily used her weak mother as bait to escape the monsters. She glares down at Sierra, brutally asking if her mother even considered the very real possibility that Cassis might have taken her hostage to escape the mansion. Without waiting for an answer, Roxana turns and heads for the door, leaving her mother in stunned silence. She pauses at the exit, tossing one final, icy warning over her shoulder, telling Sierra never to do something like that again because it only causes her more trouble. Before stepping out, she coldly adds that she'd absolutely hate to start thinking of her own mother as a burden. As she walks down the hall, a maid formally reports that he just went through the main gate. Roxana simply replies, very well, acknowledging the update without breaking her stride. Staring out the large sunlit window, she tells herself she needs to hurry and get to him before anyone else does. In the grand foyer, Dion calmly approaches Lant Agrich, announcing he has good news. Roxana watches from the top of the stairs. Lant smirks, highly amused, and asks if the news is actually going to be good for him. Suddenly, a glowing red butterfly flutters onto Roxana's hand. She gives a chilling, victorious smile as she telepathically receives the message. She has successfully hatched the poison butterfly egg. Dion is completely oblivious to the demonic power she now wields right under their noses. Roxana stands at the top of the stairs, surrounded by a terrifying swarm of invisible, blood-red butterflies. She internally declares that the stage is finally set, and it's time for her to begin the final act. Down below, Lant laughs and asks Dion what kind of butterflies he's planning to raise. Dion chuckles darkly, completely deadpan as he replies, killer butterflies, of course. Roxana elegantly walks down the stairs, making sure to perfectly play the role of the loyal daughter as she states it's an honor to contribute to the family. She internally adds that her real contribution will be completely controlling one of the most powerful demonic weapons in existence. Lant bursts into laughter, completely buying her act and praises her, saying he always has high hopes for her. As she reaches the bottom of the stairs, she deliberately stops right next to Dion. Without warning, Dion swiftly slaps her right across the face. He casually notes what a shame it is that he only hit one side. Roxana doesn't even flinch. She glares at him with pure ice, demanding to know what exactly he would have done if Cassis hadn't jumped in to save her mother at the greenhouse. Dion's expression remains completely dead as he bluntly answers, nothing. He leans in dangerously close, practically whispering into her ear, admitting he genuinely enjoys seeing her cry. Roxana just scoffs, completely unbothered by his twisted taunt. The heavy wooden doors click shut as she confidently walks away, leaving him standing there. Dion watches her go, his red eyes narrowing sharply. Roxana tosses one final look over her shoulder, completely challenging him as he internally vows she'll never see him act like that again for the rest of her life. She stands before a massive, ornate mirror, addressing her mother in her thoughts. She proudly declares that she has finally become the exact person her mother always wanted her to be, a true Agrich, and the one who perfectly resembles their monstrous father. Staring at her own reflection, she feels completely empty. She clenches her fist, finally accepting that after all these years of surviving this nightmare family, she has completely transformed into one of them. A twisted smirk spreads across her face as she whispers to her reflection, how repulsive. Later down in the dungeon, Cassis is trapped in a deep, repressed nightmare. In his dream, a powerful voice strictly commands him, warning that his holy power is a dangerous curse, not a gift. The voice booms, reminding him that the Fidelians are the noble judges of the world. It strictly forbids him from ever using his powers to slaughter, threatening that whoever loses their dignity shall perish. Suddenly, Cassis jolts awake, his golden eyes snapping open as a soft voice tells him he should get some more sleep. He looks over and sees Roxana sitting beside him. She gently places a hand on his forehead, telling him not to glare at her like that since this is only a hallucination anyway. She gives a soft, almost sad smile, whispering that she isn't even real in this room. Cassis sighs, running a hand through his hair, completely exhausted by the drug-induced illusions. He softly apologizes, admitting he hasn't felt any real emotion like this in a very long time. He looks up at the ceiling, genuinely thanking the illusion of Roxana for saving his mother, knowing she had absolutely no reason to do it. He quietly wishes she were someone he could actually hate, because then dealing with all of this would be so much easier. Realizing his mind is totally scrambled by the drugs, Roxana gently strokes his hair, softly telling him to just get some rest. She gently covers his eyes with her hand. Cassis completely relaxes under her touch, noting that even though everything is a massive, chaotic mess in this brief hallucination, none of it matters. She whispers that he'll be right back in the real world the second he opens his eyes. Cassis slowly drifts off, desperately wishing this peaceful moment could last forever. But outside the hallucination room, reality is still a nightmare. Jeremy had actually caught Roxana sneaking into tend to Cassis. Roxana stands in the hallway annoyed. She admits she hadn't planned on having Jeremy thrown into the punishment room, but the kid took it way too far by letting the monsters loose. Jeremy crosses his arms, bitterly complaining that both of their mothers look at them like they're absolute monsters. He admits he thought Roxana's mom would be different since she's so soft. But he realizes Sierra is just as terrified, always running in absolute panic whenever something happens to Roxana. Walking alone down the grand hallway, Roxana wonders why Jeremy's rants suddenly reminded her of a past conversation. She thinks back to this morning. Dion was sent to the Carental habitat, which is hardly a punishment for an elite assassin. Lant clearly just used it as a convenient excuse to send him away on another errand. She smirks, realizing Lant is incredibly sneaky for getting Dion out of the house right as her plans are falling into place. She figures she should be perfectly satisfied since she won't have to deal with the psycho for a while. But she violently scowls, totally unable to shake the memory of Dion's condescending, all-knowing stare right before he left. Roxana walks down the hall, suddenly spotting a massive basket of beautiful flowers. She casually drops it off in Cassis's room, mentioning it was just sitting outside her door when she arrived. Cassis sits up, eyeing the bouquet, and asks if it's another weird gift from one of her father's guards. She shakes her head, revealing it's actually from her mother's side. She pulls out a hidden note and laughs softly, genuinely impressed by the sheer audacity of the sender. The note is an extremely polite invitation to another tea party from Lady Maria. Roxana internally scoffs, realizing it's only been 3 days since the deadly monster attack, and Maria is already acting like nothing happened. Looking closer at the basket, she notices something hidden among the colorful petals. She pulls out a small glass vial filled with golden liquid. Giving it a quick sniff, she instantly recognizes the scent. It's a potent love potion. She sighs, figuring Maria must have noticed the bite marks she left on Cassis's neck during the punishment incident. Maria clearly assumes Roxana actually has a twisted obsession with her toy. Cassis quietly watches her, his golden eyes narrowing slightly as he tries to read the situation. He decides to break the silence, randomly asking how her mother is doing. Roxana looks over, a bit surprised he even remembered. She tells him her mother is doing much better, just a little shaken up from the monster attack. Cassis awkwardly scratches the back of his neck, muttering an uncomfortable "I see." Roxana watches him closely. He seems way calmer these days. She wonders if him saving her mother actually caused him to trust her more, hoping he finally realizes she genuinely wants to help him survive. But Cassis suddenly ruins the mood. He clenches his fist, turning to her and bluntly asking if the dark-haired man who paralyzed him with the shackles was Dion Agrich. Roxana's eyes widen slightly. She realizes Cassis must have figured out Dion's identity during the chaotic scuffle outside. Cassis asks if she knows Dion completely used her mother as bait on purpose. She admits she knows exactly what happened, and Cassis angrily demands to know how Dion could do something so sick to his own family. Roxana just stares at him, her expression totally unreadable as she rubs her thumb over Maria's wax seal. She coldly answers that it's simply because Dion is an Agrich. Changing the topic, she looks up at the ceiling and mentions she has 2 pieces of good news for him. First, the secret underground passage she showed him on the map will officially be open soon. She explains the passage stays completely sealed off for long periods to avoid detection, but the timing is finally lining up. The second piece of news completely shocks him. She casually mentions she spotted some men roaming around the estate yesterday. She specifically describes a brunette man in his mid-30s with an eye patch, asking if that rings a bell. Cassis's eyes widen, instantly recognizing his elite guards. Roxana suggests they need to send the men a sign to prove he's actually still alive, so they don't launch a suicide rescue mission. She smoothly holds out her hand, asking Cassis to pass her one of the flowers from the basket. He complies, plucking a bright red flower and handing it to her. As she takes it, she secretly slips a small green leaf into his palm. It's marked with a strange, intricate symbol. She guesses it's a secret code used by the Fidelians to communicate. She steps back, coldly stating that she completely understands if he still doesn't trust her. After all, she wouldn't believe a word she said either. But Cassis looks down at the leaf, completely ignoring her icy attitude. He softly tells her that even if she has some massive, hidden motive for doing all this, he still has to sincerely thank her for keeping him alive. Roxana's heart does a weird, unexpected flutter. She quickly brushes it off, putting her cold mask back on and reminding him it's way too early to celebrate since he's literally still locked in a dungeon. Cassis agrees, but then asks her a very specific question that catches her completely off guard. He holds up the red flower, his eyes dead serious, and asks if she actually knows what kind of flower it is. Roxana completely freezes, her eyes blowing wide open in sheer shock. Cassis stares right through her, holding the harmless-looking flower up to the light, waiting for her answer. She quickly recovers, stubbornly claiming she has no idea and defensively asking why he even cares. She mentally panics, wondering if he somehow figured out the flowers were laced with poison. Cassis sighs, dropping the act. He straight up tells her it's a highly poisonous plant, completely exposing her secret. Roxana's grip on the basket tightens violently. She completely drops her polite tone, sharply demanding to know exactly how he knows that. Cassis steps closer, his gaze unwavering as he bluntly admits he's seen the exact same flower before. Roxana's mind completely short-circuits. She knows for a fact that the Agrich family literally invented these genetically modified poison flowers in a secret lab. There is absolutely zero chance an outsider could have ever seen them. But Cassis shrugs, totally calm, telling her she can choose to believe him or not. Roxana stares at him, her brain spinning. She realizes his confident, completely relaxed attitude is totally throwing her off. Cassis crushes the flower in his hand, a serious frown crossing his face as he warns her that she needs to be much more careful with dangerous things like that. She clutches the basket, defensively arguing that it isn't what he thinks. Cassis turns away, ignoring her excuse. He genuinely advises her to at least keep her distance from the poison, even if she won't throw the flowers away. He looks back, his golden eyes completely soft, and simply states that he's warning her for her own good. Roxana finally relaxes, giving a soft chuckle. She admits she actually believes him since there's zero reason for him to lie about something so specific. But as she turns to leave, her mind is still reeling. She desperately wonders how Cassis could possibly know the Agrich's deepest, darkest secret. Sometime later, Roxana walks through the massive, sunlit corridors of the mansion, listening to the birds chirp outside. But suddenly, her vision blurs. She violently wobbles, aggressively grabbing the wall to stop herself from collapsing. She realizes keeping tabs on Dion, tracking the Fidelian guards, and secretly feeding her demonic butterfly egg is completely draining her energy. She finally steadies herself, but as she turns the corner, she spots a familiar pair of shoes. It's Charlotte. Roxana immediately puts on a wicked smirk, sarcastically asking if the brat is still in one piece after her trip to the punishment room. Charlotte violently grits her teeth, her fists completely clenched in pure rage. She glares at Roxana, bitterly complaining that her perfect older sister should have stayed locked up in her room a little while longer. In the grand hallway, Roxana coldly shuts Charlotte down, ordering her to shut up. Charlotte yells right back, screaming that she heard about the massive ruckus Cassis caused in the garden, insisting Roxana doesn't deserve to be his owner. Roxana sighs, completely annoyed by her sister's persistence. Charlotte crosses her arms and arrogantly declares that if she owned him, she would have just cut off both his legs to stop him from running away. Charlotte violently points an accusatory finger, shouting that she knows Roxana manipulated her into breaking into the dungeon to get her punished. Charlotte practically foams at the mouth, screaming that Roxana is a filthy liar who probably talked her way out of getting punished for the monster breakout. Charlotte's tantrum reaches its peak as she shrieks at the top of her lungs, vowing to take back the toy by any means necessary before storming off. Roxana gives a dark chuckle, realizing the punishment room did absolutely nothing to fix Charlotte's sheer stupidity. She holds up her hand, letting a glowing red butterfly land on her finger. She whispers a cold warning to Charlotte, telling her to take a look for herself. Down the hall, Charlotte suddenly stops, completely surrounded by a massive, swirling swarm of crimson butterflies. Charlotte looks around in total confusion, recognizing them as the deadly killer butterflies. Suddenly, the swarm aggressively attacks, violently scratching, biting, and crunching into her skin. The demonic butterflies completely engulf her, tearing into her as she screams in pure agony. Her horrifying shrieks echo down the hall. Roxana calmly watches from a distance, casually letting another butterfly flutter off her hand. She softly murmurs that she warned Charlotte before. A twisted, sinister smirk spreads across Roxana's face as she coldly states that she really hates foolish children. Charlotte collapses to the floor, her eyes wide with absolute terror, completely traumatized by the brutal swarm. Roxana telepathically warns her to never disappoint her again. Having thoroughly taught her sister a terrifying lesson, Roxana elegantly turns and walks back into her room, leaving Charlotte trembling on the floor. The scene shifts to Roxana rushing down a long, sunlit corridor. She pants heavily, desperately telling herself she just needs to hold on a little bit longer. She finally reaches the dungeon door. Cassis immediately looks up, calling her name. But as she steps inside, a disturbing trail of fresh blood drips heavily onto the floor from beneath her dress. Cassis's eyes widen in absolute horror. Before she can even say a word, Roxana completely collapses, tumbling forward and hitting the cold stone floor. Inside her fading consciousness, Roxana realizes using the poison butterflies to simultaneously track Dion and mentally torture Charlotte took a massive, near-fatal toll on her body. Cassis doesn't hesitate for a single second. With a massive surge of holy power, he forcefully snaps his heavy iron shackles with his bare hands. He completely ignores the broken chains clattering to the floor. His only focus is sprinting toward Roxana's motionless body, totally terrified that if she dies, he'll be trapped in this nightmare forever. He drops to his knees, desperately grabbing her and screaming her name, knowing that if she doesn't wake up, they might both be completely doomed.